Welcome everybody, this is SharePoint Patterns and Practices special interest group for PnP site score and the PowerShell and provisioning. And this is the March 8th, 2017 edition. And like mentioned, we probably get a lot of people joining a few minutes late, and that's relatively typical. Let's see how this goes. The video, everything will be anyway recorded, so people can actually have a look on the demos and also the topics what we're covering through from the YouTube channel whenever we get the video there, which shouldn't take that long. So typically it's a 24-hour time frame until stuff is getting released. But today, so first of all, quick introduction on the SharePoint PnP. So the SharePoint Patterns and Practices is coordinated by the SharePoint engineering, but we work together with the field, with MVPs and non-MVPs, field members, to build code samples, governance documentation to MSD and dev.office.com. We have monthly community calls, we have special interest group calls like this one. The themes are in SharePoint Framework, SharePoint Adding Model, Microsoft Graph, Office 365 development, and remote APIs in general within SharePoint. A lot of the stuff what we go through applies also for on-premises as well. And we obviously feel free to ask questions if we go through something, for example, today, how does it relate to on-premises? Well, technically on today's agenda, we're going to concentrate mainly on stuff which is only available within the SharePoint Online. So the modern site creation using the SharePoint REST APIs and also programmatically detecting the list rendering style, as in is it a modern or is it a classic rendering, is only available in SharePoint Online as well. In the on-premises, the modern experiences are not currently available, so therefore this is only related for SharePoint Online. And like you've seen probably from the past recordings and past sessions as well, we do cover quite a lot of the modern experiences within this special group quite often. So this time we do not have explicitly anything for the core component or for the PnP PowerShell, but those are absolutely evolving. There's a lot of pull requests actually getting fixed today as well, as an example, because the March master merge is happening on Friday. So we're absolutely getting the contributions in and getting the merge and released as part of the March release as a NuGet package and PowerShell commandlets. But before we go to the actual demos and actual content of today, which might be the most interesting part, for example, how to create modern sites using the REST APIs in SharePoint, let's quickly have a look on the February 2017 statistics, which are looking pretty good. I have two slides on this topic, but it's kind of interesting to see what samples and people are using and how people are actually using the PnP core or the PnP PowerShell in practice. So this is the requests and unique tenants by month in our dashboard, and we can see that we actually hit 4,000 tenants which are using well, actually, we hit 3,998 tenants, to be precise, which are using the PnP PowerShell or PnP site score in the SharePoint Online. And from a request perspective, we just barely hit 1.5 billion HTTP requests coming through PnP site score or the PnP PowerShell. So the numbers are pretty impressive, no doubt. From a site provisioning perspective, we hit our record from a tenant usage perspective, so 1,140 tenants actually use the PnP provisioning engine. And that's a pretty significant number, obviously. The second kind of thing, super interesting thing on this one is that you're able to see how people are using the PnP provisioning engine. So you can actually see that the slightly more people are using the PnP PowerShell to provision sites and applying and templates to SharePoint Online using the provisioning engine rather than using the native Visual Studio code as such. Technically, the PnP PowerShell is using the core component as well on the background, but we are differentiating this within our metrics as well. So we're able to kind of understand what's the balance between managed code and then PnP PowerShell usage. From a country perspective, some interesting statistics here as well. So this is the top 10 countries from a request count perspective in February 2017. So US absolutely number one there as well. UK is quite high as well. So if you would divide the number of tenants between the requests, UK would actually win US. There was quite a few tenants in UK which clearly were doing some sort of a massive migrations where the PnP provisioning engine no doubt helps. The PnP provisioning engine does not do migration, but quite often when you do migration, you want to make sure that the target site within a SharePoint Online has the needed customizations, like it has the list, it has the content types, fields, and all of that, where then you use a third-party migration tooling or whatever tooling to push the functionalities in. That's why the PnP provisioning engine is quite often used within in the migration scenarios as well. Finland is pretty high from HTTP request perspective. I have nothing to do with that, so it's just the Finnish partners are using PnP quite heavily. Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland, Norway, and Iceland. Relatively typical set from a monthly perspective, but we can see growth across all of the countries, which is pretty cool. From a tenant number perspective, we can see US is always there, number one, because there's the most tenants in the US, and then UK typically is the number two. Netherlands is pretty close, catching up with UK. Then Germany, Sweden, Australia, Norway, France, Denmark, and Switzerland. So from a country perspective, this is relatively typical divider as well. And maybe to mention there, if you're using German cloud, we're not actually getting any of those statistics, because if there's a customer who's using a German cloud, we don't actually get any statistics on that, because that's hosted not by Microsoft, it's hosted by the T systems, unless completely mistaken. Good. From a sample perspective, and this is the second slide, which I quickly wanted to show, and this is super interesting as well. So we're tracking which of the samples people are actually viewing from the PnP repositories in a GitHub. And this is giving us insights on where the biggest demand in a sample perspective in our functionalities. And from a sample perspective, the SharePoint UI responsive package is no doubt the number one fellow. So that's where the functionality, well, that's typically the thing which is requested the most. And it seems to be that there is a interesting side discussion. I do apologize quickly. It seems to be that we still have some issues with our invite, so there are two different calls for a reason or another where people are actually landing. So I'm actually gonna paste in the right URL on that second window, because we seem to have few people there as well. Good. So from a February 2017 sample perspective, so the SharePoint UI responsive package is the number one that is enabling classic SharePoint to be responsive. All of the modern SharePoint sites, they're responsive by default. The core component, README, that's understandable as well. The SharePoint framework samples, their usage is growing significantly all the time. So we can actually, for example, the SharePoint CRUD sample, it clearly peaked immediately when we went GA with the SharePoint framework, because people are then, they want to start looking into, okay, how do I actually start using the SharePoint framework as well? And then PnP.js core sample, embed JavaScript, a typical scenario as well. MIMSync is quite often pretty high as well. Remote event receivers, that's fine as well, or understandable as well. On the embed JavaScript and JS Link scenarios, kind of a customizations from a UI perspective in the SharePoint, we need to remember that in SharePoint Online, these scenarios only work within a classic UI. The modern UI does not support JS Link or user custom action scenarios for time being. They are there, we're working on them. Our engineering guys are already working on that one, and it will be light up in the modern experiences sooner or later. I do not have a timeline for that one, unfortunately. And what else? Anything more specific there? Not really. Kind of a typical set of samples, except that we can clearly see a higher interest on a SharePoint framework samples than in the previous month. Now, and total sample view is around 43,000 views in a GitHub, which is pretty high from a even comparison perspective, and that's really cool. Good. Moving on things. So let me, and that my clicker actually works. So moving on a completely new topic. So from a statistics and metrics, and that's kind of cool. People are using the stuff, and which is awesome, and people are contributing quite heavily as well, which is awesome as well. Now, completely different topic, which I promised to show already 2 weeks ago within this call, is that how we can provision modern SharePoint sites with the REST API. And the key difference between this approach and the previous approach, which we showed back in November, is that previously we said that you need to actually create, or you're able to create modern sites by creating an Office 365 group by using a Microsoft Graph endpoint. Technically, we do have this REST API, or right now we already do have a supported way of doing this also in a SharePoint. So in a SharePoint, you do have a REST API, first of all, to check if the alias which you're planning to create is available for you to create a modern site and a group, and second of all, to create actually a group in a SharePoint or a site in a SharePoint, which will also create the Office 365 group as well. And really the key difference between this approach and once again comparing to using the Microsoft Graph approach is that with Microsoft Graph you have to use interactive logging. Essentially meaning that you need to sign in against Azure AD, and that means that you cannot use that approach when or in a backend process, like for example using a web job or using an Azure function. Using the REST APIs, you can actually do that. There is, however, a small challenge of this one as well, because typically when people are having, let's say, async provisioning process in a web job, they are using app only. Unfortunately, the modern SharePoint sites cannot be used or created or provisioned, at least for now, and most likely this won't be changed in the future, using the app only option. And we do understand that at this point some people might be like, no, but we need to use app only. The challenge is not actually in a SharePoint. SharePoint would be able to do this. The problem is in the Azure AD and in an Exchange site. So Azure AD is expecting an identity, and Mikael is actually pointing that you can create groups with the app tokens, and we can come back on that one slightly later. But anyway, and absolutely we'll double check that one because might be that Mikael has some additional things and additional considerations on his agenda. But anyway, so there is a REST endpoint which you can use in the SharePoint context to create a modern SharePoint site, which will actually create also the Azure AD group and also the Exchange endpoint as well. And that's the Create Groups EX endpoint. And the engineering people who own this endpoint, we have already gone through the discussions that this is locked down. We're able to document this, and we're able to actually share with you that you're able to use this endpoint. So we're not planning to change any of the required values or required properties or required attributes. So this will work in the future as well. Oh, and the final note on that one, I'm going to show this one in practice during the demo as well. So whenever we are provisioning a modern site, the modern site provisioning is super fast. One of the reasons why it's super fast is that we actually have parts which are asynchronously activated. As an example, the site assets folder or site assets library is asynchronously provisioned to the site unless an end user actually creates the site assets before the asynchronous process. And this means that there's a kind of a, how would I put it? When you hit the endpoint and the site is getting created, you are not actually in the situation that you have the final version of the site at that point. And that is something which we need to be aware. That is something which, from a Microsoft perspective, we will provide some guidance and we'll get more additional clarifications, which are the things which are getting asynchronously provisioned in the future. But let's actually have a look on this one quickly in a simplistic demo. And this is super dirty code and quick code because unfortunately running out of time. But let me show this one in practice using a simplistic console application. And I'm sharing my screen, so waiting for somebody to confirm whenever the screen sharing is working properly.
It's up for me.
Thank you, Frank. Excellent. Cool. Good. So let me slightly adjust the font so it's slightly bigger so you can actually see what's happening here. And this is really simplistic C# console application, which I just barely got up and running from a REST operation perspective, and I wanted to essentially show you the process, and then we can actually see the site getting created. We can talk about what does the async model mean and all of that. But let me run through the sample and I'll show you how it actually works. So in my case, I'm using my own personal tenant. I'm using my own personal account for that one. I'm not going to show you my password, so I'm reading that from my enterprise environmental variables. This is just the model what I use in my demos and in my structure, so I don't actually need to do that. And if you, by the way, if you see value of this super simplistic sample, we can absolutely get this out in the March release of PnP as well. But when I do an F5, this is going to start my console application, and essentially it's asking the group display name. Let's call this SIG demo group or SIG demo site. And then it's asking me the group alias, which is going to be essentially the alias for this, the URL for the site, which is going to be created. So let's call this SIG demo site. And at that point, we should have a breakpoint, hopefully waiting in the, there we go, in the Visual Studio. So switching to Visual Studio side. The first thing what we have in the code, in the sample, is that we're checking if that URL is available. And essentially what the endpoint is doing here, which says get valid site URL from alias, is that we are returning you a valid URL, which is going to be the URL of the created site, or we're going to return you an empty string. Empty string means that the URL or the alias is already taken. It might be taken in Azure AD, it might be taken in Exchange, or it might be taken in SharePoint. And there's ways to figure out where is it actually taken, but that's kind of irrelevant for the demo and irrelevant for the sake that, okay, I cannot use that alias, I need to use an alternative URL. So that's essentially that REST endpoint. So we're running a get operation there. We're adding that alias, which was given as a property for the console application. So nothing too special and fancy here. We're just running a get operation against SharePoint Online. We're adding the needed authentication models with cookies from our SharePoint Online context. Just quickly explaining that one as well. So I'm going to do an F5. Well, actually, let's do quickly this. So we're adding that cookie. So we're able to actually call against SharePoint Online. We're doing an HTTP call. That's the get setup. That's the URL. Setting the headers. Possible authorization model in the future, and then we're doing the request. We're getting 200 back, and in this case, we're then getting the response string. And in my essentially hosting fellow, it is checking is the string empty, and in this case, it's not empty. That means that that URL is technically free for us to be used as the URL for SharePoint site. So essentially that API, like mentioned, is checking SharePoint, it is checking the Azure AD, and it's checking the Exchange availability for that alias. So in this case, I'm returning true, all good. We can use the alias, and then we can actually move forward on creating that modern site. So let's actually do that. Let's actually get the stuff moving. And I'm jumping directly on the operation itself. So we're doing a post operation. We do have a serialized, we serialized the JSON or we serialized the JSON from a C# object using JSON.NET in this case, which we're gonna actually put as the body for our HTTP post operation. And if I'm able to, let's actually do this. So if we have a look on that, here we go. We can see that in a JSON we have that value as a description. We have the alias, and in this case I'm always doing a public true. So it's available for people to use. And then it's nothing more than doing HTTP post operation, adding the headers properly. I need to get the request digest for post operation, which is needed when we're doing a REST post operations against SharePoint Online. So that's going to be fetched from SharePoint Online. We're putting that one to this request as X request digest. There's the request value from digest value, and then it's nothing more than actually doing the actual post operation. And at this point, it takes like 2 seconds, which is super fast, or well, 5 seconds. We are pretty fast getting the response back. Well, more than 5 seconds, but not too bad. So the success status code is true, so the response was successful. We can actually move forward, and then we can deserialize the JSON value. And at that point, we're getting the site URL, which was actually created. So now if I go back in my caller and in my console application, I'm actually getting the HTTP address. And let's copy that. Let's go to my right session. Let's move that browser to the right location. And we can see that we have a modern theme site available in SharePoint Online within that URL with a random coloring, and it's all ready to go. The few things to notice on this one. So if I go to site information and if I go to all site settings, you can see that the site settings is having all of the functionalities and all of the things available. If you have played around with the Microsoft Graph endpoint for creating groups, there is actually a delay on getting some of these links visible in site settings, 2 reasons or another. The other thing to notice with this site is that basically the site is available for end users to use. But the challenge, one of the challenges what we're right now having, which we need to also figure out in general in Microsoft, is the asynchronous way of some of these elements getting provisioned. So as you can see, the site assets folder is not yet here. If we would wait for an hour or 30 minutes, I can't remember what's the default timeout for this operation or the async execution. If we would wait, we would eventually have the site assets folder created for us for this particular site. And essentially that is a challenge, because if you know, as part of your site provisioning, as part of executing that REST operation, after that you would want to do, let's say, and apply a template, PnP provisioning template on top of this, and then you would like to upload some assets to the site assets folder. The site assets folder might not be there, so you need to programmatically double check, is it there? And if it's not there, you can actually create it. In the same way, if the end user actually starts using the site, it is completely usable. If I start, for example, adding, let's say that I'm adding an image web part on this site, I can actually directly upload an image from my local machine, and that is getting uploaded to the site. If I now do publish and go to the site contents, we can actually see that the site assets folder has been now created. If you wouldn't do this manually, it would get created there automatically after a certain time period, which could be a small asynchronous challenge from an execution perspective. And yes, on the Sebastian's, and well, Bert mentioned, answered on that one already. So if you would create the site assets folder programmatically as part of your process, the async process will recognize that and then you would be good to go. There is a specific methods and specific way how the site assets folder has to be created because it's a special folder. It's not a standard document library folder. So as a summary, like mentioned in the window, this isn't a super bad situation that is an async. One of the clear benefits out of the fact that it's an async process is that the site is getting created super fast. So the modern sites are super light, they're super fast, and you get them to be visible, available as part of the provisioning process extremely fast as well. Theoretically, you could do this in an asynchronous process from a self-service site collection creation form, but still we would encourage people to use the async process because if your execution of the REST API and whatever modifications what you're doing in your code, if that takes longer than 1 minute and you're hosted in Azure as a web job, as a web application, as a provider hosted add-in or whatever is your preferred option, if the execution takes more than 1 minute, it will time out. So from that perspective, having the whole provisioning as an asynchronous process using the Azure queues, storage queues as an example, or using the Azure functions is no doubt the right way to do stuff. Sorry, excuse me. But that was really the key demo on this one. So quickly coming back on the point, like mentioned, technically the fact that I'm doing this in a C# in a console application is kind of I would say even irrelevant. You can absolutely do this in a Node.js. You can do this in a whatever platform. It is just a matter of getting and formalizing the post operation to the right URL and having the right structure to get posted there, where you are essentially providing the display name alias and the is public value, either false or true. And voila, we can actually do this functionalities. And I need to follow up with Mikael because on the app only access, because Mikael seems to have some additional insights on that. We will anyway document all of the story related on app only and non-app only, and what can be done and how it should be and how it can be done in MSDN and as part of our generic samples. So we can absolutely get this shared with you in a more detailed way. Sebastian is asking, well, when will this API be available to us? Is it already there? And this is already there, but there's no documentation for this one except this video. So, like mentioned, we will absolutely update our documentation. It is the modern experiences customization story. So let me do PnP MSDN modern experiences, just showing everybody that you're able to understand where the guidance is. Here we go, customizing modern experiences in SharePoint Online, and in here we have a provisioning modern team sites programmatically. So this article will be updated with that REST endpoint API, and we will have a sample which will show how to make that happen. Right now, this article only pinpoints how to use the Microsoft Graph way of actually creating a modern group. And that has a slightly different behavior, again, because when we're hitting the Microsoft Graph endpoint, we are creating the group in a, how would I put it, in an alternative route. There is a difference when you are creating the group either from Exchange or in an Outlook site, or from Exchange driven, or when you're creating the group from a SharePoint driven perspective. And eventually the async processes will make sure that the site has all of the same things. So eventually the site will have the exact same functionalities. Okay, so Mikael is actually sharing that. So there is an app only for PnP commandlet for Microsoft Graph with a pull request, which Irvin has already merged. Cool. So you can actually use the app only with the commandlets as well, which is good. So with the commandlets and obviously using the native code as well. So that's really good as well. And thank you, Bert, for the AKMS, SPPNP, MSDN. There's a question using this API creates the group also, I guess, absolutely. So whenever we use this API, and going back on the Visual Studio and showing the REST endpoint, whenever we're using this REST endpoint, it is just one route to create a group. And the group will create essentially Office 365 group, which will have the Exchange mailbox, it will have the Azure AD group, it will have the SharePoint site, which is the modern SharePoint site. So it doesn't really matter from which application, is it from Outlook, or is it from Azure side, or is it from SharePoint side you're creating this group, it will have all of the same capabilities. But this will no doubt help people, more classic people, well, that's a wrong way of putting that. If you're more towards writing your stuff through SharePoint, this REST endpoint will give you the capability of using SharePoint Online credentials, signing in or using a system account from Azure Web Job or from Azure Functions, and actually make stuff happen in SharePoint and provision stuff, provision new sites, and then maybe customize slightly the modern sites as well. There are certain customization, let's say, limitations still in the modern sites, and all of those are also defined and explained in MSDN guidance. So supported customizations, what's not supported with modern sites, and all of that. So, and we keep on updating this. So the latest update, for example, for this one is the 10th of February. So we will keep on updating this as we move along. In the future, will this also create something in the Microsoft Teams? We are looking into that one. So we are looking into having a sync between the Teams and SharePoint side as well. I can't give you any timelines on that one. We're working on it. Seem to be falling on my table from a SharePoint side, but that's a different discussion. Is there a same endpoint that is used by Graph Exchange from Sebastian? So basically, it's not the same endpoint, but the behavior is exactly the same. Speaking about undocumented SharePoint APIs, any info about SP auth token acquire endpoint, which is used by the PowerPoint BI SPFX web part? We will have more around that one later. Let's put it this way. But that is a fair question, and let me actually get that question quoted. There we go. I'm copying Arto's question, and I'll say we will have an internal discussion in engineering on that. What is the support story PnP for enterprise? I was told over the weekend a minute that large enterprises will not use it because it's not supported by Microsoft. So what's supported and what's not supported? It's a wording game. So PnP is an open source community-driven initiative. So it doesn't mean that it's a product. It's not PnP, it's not part of the SharePoint service, it's not part of the SharePoint product as such. Is it supported from a use PnP in production? Absolutely, you can use PnP in production. It is signed off by engineering, but when you need to have support or you're running into issues, you cannot call to Premier Support and say, hey, PnP is broken, because it's an open source initiative. So that's essentially the difference between open source and what is a product. Open source community initiative versus what's natively within a product. The PnP is using native APIs. So if there's any issues with PnP, quite often the issues are actually they might be in a native API as well. Slightly depends on the scenario. And that is no doubt a problem for enterprises if enterprises are not willing to use open source initiative or open source community-driven code. That is absolutely true. Then those enterprises might not be using PnP. So from a usage perspective, we know that some of our biggest enterprise customers in SharePoint Online are using PnP. But again, it is really around the policy of the enterprise itself. And quite often what happens from a supportability perspective is that partner or whoever is actually delivering the solution for the enterprise is actually taking ownership of the support. So essentially, the PnP itself is a library. It's a library like any other JavaScript library out there. It's like jQuery. jQuery doesn't have support. jQuery is built, it's an open source initiative which is supported by the community. If you're using jQuery, technically it's exactly the same usability and supportability challenge as with the PnP initiative or PnP core component. Good. Let's actually flip. Do we want to, Bert, flip back on the slides for your demo?
Yes. I have one slide before the demo that I want to talk about.
So let's do that. Let me flip back on the slides, and Bert will do a quick demo as well. I'll get back on the questions in a second. And that's now starting. What's the current capabilities and limitations of extracting and applying Office traces to a group template by using PnP PowerShell? Good question. Essentially, in the modern groups, modern sites have the NoScript capability enabled. So, as an example, or there are limitations from a customization perspective. The PnP PowerShell does recognize, or the PnP core provisioning engine does recognize that, hey, this site is a modern site, this is a group site, therefore I'm not extracting certain elements because it's not supported. We cannot actually extract certain elements from the sites. And then it's going to apply at the same time when you're applying, it's going to recognize, hey, this is a modern site. I'm not going to actually apply certain elements. Right now, though, as an example, we do not have a support for modifying the front page of the group site in the PnP engine, which technically we could do. Right, Bert? Just our Irvin and Paolo in the call as well, because we can actually modify the welcome page, but that's a complex discussion anyway.
Well, there are certain limitations on modern sites when it comes
to
modifying them. You mentioned homepage, just like a property bag, for example. Writing stuff in a property bag is blocked. Custom actions, essentially everything with NoScript, which falls under the NoScript bucket, is blocked for modern sites by default today, and that's. The engine takes that in account, so we'll avoid running into an error by just logging, like we're not doing this particular action because we are provisioning towards a modern site.
Yes. And essentially, it's not a modern site. Specific limitation, the story is exactly the same with the classic site, which has the NoScript enabled. So.
Yes.
But good, Bert.
Yeah, let me move some slides. I stole the presentation. So we saw the demo. Great. Okay, we stay on the modern topic in this cycle. What I want to talk about today is around the challenge enterprises have with rolling out the modern experience. Because in enterprise, it's huge, it's distributed, it has 10,000s of site collections with hundreds of thousands of libraries, all fine. And what happens if you turn on the modern experience, or you didn't turn it off because actually it was on by default for everyone? The end result is that you will see like a big chunk of the libraries showing the new modern experience. Cool. But however, there are a certain set of libraries which render in classic. They still show the classic UI. And that's because we have a fallback mechanism inside the modern experience. Essentially, we will check like, okay, can we properly render this library in modern? If so, yes. If not, we fall back to classic. Reasons for falling back to classic are, for example, I'm using a geolocation field, or I'm using a managed metadata navigation, or I have a JS link customization. So there are certain aspects of a library which are not yet implemented in modern, and as such we fall back to classic. One big bucket of reasons why we fall back to classic. Another reason is that users can, at site, web, and list level, you can control whether modern is used or not. You can actually turn it off. And that flexibility is good. The other end, it makes it for a big enterprise hard to kind of get a view on how widely can I adopt the modern experience. Those enterprises want to know, like, okay, which are the sites, which are the libraries which cannot be shown in modern, and why? And to answer that why question, we recently added a new API. Well, actually, it's a property on the file object called page render type, which will tell you, like, okay, this particular file, and when I'm talking about file, I'm talking, for example, about the all items.aspx file. So the forum page that is rendering the library, because you can have multiple of those pages. So let's take the all items.aspx forum page. If you load that one and you check the page render type property, you will see, like, okay, it will be rendering in modern, yes, good, or no, it will not be rendering modern, and this is why. And that's important information if you want to work on your existing customizations that block modern. Now, and the third step in the story is that, okay, we have now the API. We're also building a tool, a scanner, that you can run across your tenant, which will run across all the site collections, all the webs inside the site collections, all the libraries, and it will figure out what's compatible and what's not compatible. So you can have a clear view on which areas in your tenant, which libraries are not compatible and why. At that point, you can start working on enabling changing customizations, for example, to allow modern or turning modern back on for the places where the user turned it off. So you will have more control. The modern scanner, actually, its work has just started. Anticipated delivery time, I would say, like early April. But once it's there, we'll definitely make some noise about it and show it in this call, and do a webcast recording, etc. So you will definitely will learn when it's available. And if you want to learn more about the actual API and the background, we updated the MSN article that Vesta just showed before. So in the same set of articles, there is also one talking about modern listed libraries, which has all these details. Now, I think it's easier to just show a demo of this. So let me share my desktop. And it's a really, really simple demo, but it shows what it needs to show. All right, just can you confirm when it's visible? Can you, let's plan B, can you show the MSN documentation?
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Because that explains it as well.
Yes. Because my sharing is working. Your sharing is broken. Good.
All right, if you go to the modern listed libraries, yep, scroll down to that one, yep. So the MSN article describes the reasoning why we flip back to a classic experience, which was there already like a month ago or so. But that's kind of interesting, but hard to use unless you start writing your own logic to implement that reasoning. So luckily we have this API for both CSOM and REST, and it's really simple. Essentially, you load the forum page that you want to check, whether is this particular forum page rendering in modern or classic. Okay, let's take all items.aspx for the ECM test forum, and it will give you a page render type, which is an enum. It will give you modern, or it has like a bunch of reasons why it's not modern. So if you scroll down, Vesa, there is a large list of reasons why it is not modern. And this is the current status. So today we don't support JS link customization or custom XSL link. Or if you, for example, put multiple web paths on your forum page, there's reasons not to support it. If you look at, for example, number 14, 15, 16, these are overrides by the user. So we enabled the site collection feature that turned modern off, or we enabled the web feature, or what list setting the user disabled modern. So all of this information is delivered via the API, and with the modern experience scanning tool, you will get like a compiled data across your farm around the modern experience and why it's not potentially not working for some of the libraries.
Yes, so basically the value of this one is that, hey, why is this list falling back on classic rendering? I don't get it.
Yeah.
So using this API, you're able to get a clear clarification. This is the official documentation. What's actually then the clarification for that one?
Yes. And Paul's question is, does this return multiple values or just the first one it hits? It's a single value. I've not seen multiple values being returned so far. So,
because yeah, you could actually have a list setting and a tenant setting, so you don't actually get that. It is falling on the first level. But this is a good backup if you can't figure out why you're falling back on the classic in certain lists.
Yeah, or if you have an ISV solution, or just your solution needs to be compatible with both experiences.
Sure.
Using this API, you can determine, like, okay, what's the context I'm living in?
And yeah, so in this list, I'm living in the classic mode, so therefore I will render myself slightly differently in JavaScript, and I'm theoretically can use the same JavaScript in the future for the modern list functionalities, or at least part of it.
Yes.
This way you can share the same JavaScript autologic, no doubt. And in the future, JSLink and user custom actions and all of this is absolutely coming to modern experiences as well.
Yep. And then this API can be used to make a solution which can handle both experiences.
Yes.
Over time. But yeah, we're not there yet.
Not yet. Getting there, absolutely.
Yes. So yeah, that's it. So short. Well, sorry for the demo, but the demo was really simple. It just showed like a list with a JS link applied and showing you the results. So I think that this should explain the same details.
Yep, absolutely. Cool. Switching back on the slides, I do have one additional slide. Oh, that's your demo slide, and then this was the additional slide. So something just for people to be aware. So 2 weeks ago in the SIG, we already shared that, hey, awesome, the PnP PowerShell command-led documentation is in MSDN. And if I remember the address correctly, it is AKMS SPPnP PowerShell, because I think we updated that URL as well. Yes, we did. So if you're looking into having documentation on the PnP PowerShell commandlets, this is now in MSDN as well. The immediate follow-up discussion is that, hey, okay, what about PnP Sites Core? The PnP Sites Core has a lot of operations and methods and extensions for season, and we're working on that automated documentation to get published in MSDN as well. And then one of the, let's say, new areas which we're also working, and this is more related on the SharePoint dev, not precisely on PnP, is a full documentation on the SharePoint REST API. And this is something, essentially, the first version of that one will have the types, properties, and methods without proper descriptions, and we do apologize on that, but we need to move forward step by step with that one as well. Anyway, having the REST API documentation in MSDN or docs.microsoft.com relatively soon is super valuable for SharePoint framework as well. And it's pretty awkward that we don't have that documentation out there for the time being. So absolutely working on that one as well. Good. And yes, the slide is intentionally having a small choke. So the gray area, you can imagine an awesome looking MSDN or docs.microsoft.com experience for scanning through the docs. So, but because we don't have it yet, I was unable to have that picture there. Good. Other than that, I think we do not have more to talk about today, unless there's questions about what we've gone through, or questions or feedback or whatever. And more than happy to help with any questions. Anything related on SharePoint Dev, if there is any. But that was essentially the main agenda for today. So how to use REST APIs to provision modern SharePoint sites, and also the additional endpoint. And Ralph has a question, at least. Lots of documentation on the managed CSM API is still pointing to 2013 version, which leaves you wondering if it's still current. Sorry for laughing and sorry for smiling. It's not a matter of a humor, but humor is one way of coping out of these situations. But we've been working on getting the CSM documentation updated. I've been personally working on getting it updated now for 6 months, and it's a sad story. But it should be now a matter of days, actually, when the CSM documentation is updated. Technically, the CSM documentation, which is currently in MSDN, is not actually even for SharePoint 2013. It is actually for SharePoint Online, but MSDN is showing that it would be for SharePoint 2013, which is a massive mistake and highly confusing, but we're finally getting that fixed. Let's put it this way. I'm not going to go to internal details on that one. On Ralph's question, to template or not to template, people still making those WSBs and attempting to use them, losing brand when then reuse them for subsites, etc. We do not officially even recommend people to use WSBs. That's the challenge. People use them because they're familiar of using them. And yes, it's a technology which was implemented 12 years ago and introduced in SharePoint 2007, feature framework and deployment mechanism. So people are kind of familiar with that one. It has, however, significant implications as well. So we would definitely recommend of using, not using WSB packages where possible. WSB packages are in pain. How did I actually flip there? Let's keep that slide there. Yeah, if possible, WSB packages have known challenges, and obviously code behind sandbox solutions are no longer supported in SharePoint Online. Declarative sandbox solutions, they do work. There's no however APIs to activate them, so somebody would have to do that manually. The second dimension is that there's a massive risk of somebody introducing something as part of the WSB package, which would then impact the site if the WSB package is deactivated or the feature is deactivated. And quite often end users don't understand what does the deactivation mean, and that can then cause challenges. One of the most challenging cases in the longer run will be custom site templates. Custom list templates. So if you introduce a custom list template with the unique IDs and then you deactivate that sandbox solution, then after that all of the existing lists which are referencing to that list templates are no longer working. So then you will run yourself into challenges. So just quickly scanning through the discussion. I'll read out the retraction for custom actions, upgrade actions for features. Yeah, cleaning after. Yes, absolutely. So why have they come back into SVFX? They are so 2007. Good question from Nigel. So whatever we have in the SharePoint framework, that is a super simplistic, it's like 10% of the feature framework, and that is there to enable the provisioning time elevation in a most simplistic way until we will have more future-proof model to do that. And we do not support list templates. We do not support anything which would be harmful with SharePoint framework and SharePoint framework and feature framework combination. If a modern site in Office 365 group is deleted, is there a means to restore the site or group? I think there should be, but I haven't actually looked into that one. That's a good question. We should have that guidance somewhere. Michael Svensson is answering recycle bin on groups is coming. Yes, cool. So you're able to then restore Well, essentially, the assets will be fully deleted only after it has been deleted from a recycle bin as well. And I can imagine that there's no exact timeline for that. Yes, it is in the roadmap, but typically we don't want to give an exact month or even a month beforehand because who knows if there will be small delays on the deliverables. How do modern team sites work if the client is not using Exchange Online? What was it, Bert? You looked into this Exchange
I think
dependency.
You need to have an Exchange Online
to actually make the whole functionality to work in the first place, yes. So you cannot provision a team site using the modern UI. You are always provisioning a group, and you need to have Exchange license and Azure AD and SharePoint to make that happen. Yes, correct. On Ralph's comment around groups needs Exchange Online, and that is correct. Any plans to support it without Exchange Online? Nope. I don't think so, no.
The power of groups is just the fact that it spans across Exchange and SharePoint.
And Azure AD, so that's really the key point of the groups. Is that it's on both sides, but that's why there's a smiley on the question as well. Without Exchange Online, groups will be created, but some links will not work. Yes. Okay, there's a Benoit has been testing this, and that's not an optimal situation. Obviously we should not show any groups or those links if the functionality is not working. So
yeah, wonder whether that's actually support the model.
That's
even if it can be triggered somehow.
True. Good. Let your site collections go. Yes. But with Teams UI, will allow to manage members of group, even though the Exchange isn't there. Interesting. Okay. The problem is obvious.
The group is in Azure AD, and
it is.
The mailbox is in Exchange, and the site is in SharePoint.
True. And the Teams is in Teams.
And Teams is in Teams.
Teams is in Teams. Whatever the Teams, what are those things? In Microsoft Teams, we have Teams. Yes, we have Teams. What's the story with site collection management as they don't appear on the SharePoint Online Admin Center? They don't do that right now. They are planned to get there, visible in the upcoming refresh of the SharePoint Online Admin UIs. I think first we will see them in the classic admin UIs, and then there will be a modern UIs at some point as well. So for time being, it is a pretty awkward situation. You can only see these modern SharePoint sites in the groups section of the Office 365 admin, and that's slightly confusing. And we also have a, let's say, changes pending, which we haven't shipped yet on a native SharePoint Online tenant object. We're able to say that, hey, give me SharePoint sites, or give me groups, or give me also OneDrive for Business sites.
That should OneDrive 1 is actually in. It will be in the March release of PnP.
Yes.
Allowing OneDrive sites. So it's a new API which now finally has been rolled out worldwide across all tenants. So we're using it in PnP.
Yeah. And absolutely agree on Arthur's comment on that one. Exchange Online requirement could be a blocker, no doubt. Good. We're hitting on the hour. Good discussion in the ION window. Anyway, hopefully the demos today were useful. So the how to provision SharePoint, modern SharePoint sites from a REST API perspective, just out of quick curiosity on that one, is there benefits out of sharing that super simplistic console application sample around that? So we can push it out in the March PnP release if that's beneficial. Okay, cool. So people can easily then have a look on that and figure it out. It probably won't be super polished code because we're kind of running out of time for the March release as well. But getting it out, no doubt, is a easier thing.
Eventually, it will end up in the PnP site-score library as well.
Yes, it will be in the PnP site-score library in April release, most likely.
Yes.
Or it will be in April release. We just need to get it polished and design the methods for it and everything else. But I think that's it. Thank you everybody for joining. For this one, we'll get the video published to the YouTube channel within 24 hours, like typically. There will be a Twitter tweet whenever that actually happens, so people can share the recording to their colleagues and all of that. But thank you for joining. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for the good discussion in the Iron Window again, and keep on sending us feedback. So cheers. We'll be in touch.
Cheers. Bye-bye.